Hey, you guys. I'm just, yeah, so I just wanted to talk about a couple of things, and it's kind of like a repeat of what I was talking about yesterday on the transmission. So if you listen to me then, yeah, you already heard this, but I just got this feeling that I've just been mulling over in my mind again, and I kind of want to just do a public video about this, I guess, just because I do. I want to do a public video about it rather than just having it on the members section. But so what I was talking about yesterday, I was talking about the location the location of now, or like the heart and what that means. And I think yeah, I just think it's valuable information. So that's why I'm doing it again. So there's like three parts to this, right? And this is what I talked about yesterday. So there's the first part is one way of meditating. There's also like just a way of thinking, a way of it's just well, the first thing is just observing how you think about stuff, right? And so what I was mentioning yesterday was like the hand, like we think about the hand, right? It's like the first part of some styles of meditation. And so the big thing here is that when you think about the hand, uh, when you really focus on the hand and on the movement of air around the hand and the feeling of the hand, what actually happens is our awareness of the rest of the body diminishes, right? So there's an awareness of the hand, and our awareness of the rest of the body diminishes. But when we move our awareness somewhere else, like for example, into my foot, now the foot is sort of highlighted and the awareness of the rest of the body diminishes. Um, and so there's sort of like there's like an area of focus and then a diminishment of focus. Um, and that's sort of a variable. It's like a variable lens. It can be open and closed. You can fine tune it. You can make a very, very narrow aperture. For example, you can focus on the foot, or you could focus on the big toe, or you could focus on the nail of the big toe, or you could focus on the skin underneath the nail, or you could focus on one of the arteries in the big toe, or you could focus on one of the particles of one of the arteries of the big toe. And obviously, when you get to that level, you're actually moving into imagination, which is fine. But the idea is you can scope it in as tight as you want, or you can make it bigger. You can actually zoom in on the foot, and then on the lower leg, then on the leg, both legs, the lower body, right? So this idea that there is a sort of a focus, and then as you focus on something, uh, the other things, while still there, are actually diminished in their apparent focus. And this doesn't seem like a big deal. I mean, it's the funny thing about it is it's so obvious, right? I mean, this is not like a big wow moment. This is like, yeah, it's so obvious. It's like, yeah, whatever. Who cares, right? Who cares? But it's really important. Um, it's really important. So this is one of the ideas. Now, one of the things that I've been teaching, I guess, is that as we move awareness around the body, what we're actually focusing on in general is we're focusing on the sense of touch, right? So if we're thinking about the hand, what we're really doing is we're thinking about, do I feel something in my hand? And that's actually the metric we use when we decide if we actually do awareness. Is like, oh, do I feel something around there? Do I feel a kind of awareness around that? Um, and um, And yeah, so that's kind of like the metric we use. But the idea that the trick here is when we're thinking about the hand, we're thinking about, well, do I feel awareness? And I guess the construct there is, do I feel awareness? That's kind of like what we always think about. We always think about my awareness. It's my awareness of the hand. But what I guess I've been trying to teach is that what we need to do is stop thinking about it as my awareness, right? Or it's not even stop thinking about it. It's not, don't stop thinking about it as my awareness. The thing is just to become aware that that's how we think about it. That we're actually identifying myself through the awareness of touch, right? And so if you actually think about who you think you are, a lot of that, awareness of who you think you are is actually coming um, through your senses. In fact, I'd say almost all of it is coming through your senses and then through memory constructs of what those sense memories are, and then also projections of what we'd like the sensual inputs to be. A good example of this is like if you haven't eaten breakfast today, you might be thinking about lunch. And I mean, those are direct sensual desires channeled through like maybe smell, maybe touch, thinking about the texture, maybe taste, right? I know I go downtown here sometimes, and the kids always want me to stop off at this bakery, and they got a little shopping list of things. Like they get these chocolate, like little chocolate croissant things, and like blueberry muffins. And like every time you go in there, I'm trying to be careful with my diet, but then the sensory input is really quite staggering. The sensory inputs are quite impressive um, tools, like in consciousness, right? And you start thinking, well, maybe I could enjoy a blueberry muffin. Um, so the point is that the our not even willingness, it's our tendency is more than tendency. Our complete connection to identification with the senses is um, is an interesting phenomenon. So, as I've mentioned a few times, and I mentioned it yesterday in the book, The Recognition Sutras by Christopher Wallace, he points out that maybe what needs to be done is the senses need to be recognized. The senses need to be recognized as actually not mine, right? So the senses are actually an instrument of something bigger than we are. So, for example, if you actually take the time to observe your touch input, like the actual input of sensations you receive from your sensation of touch is astonishing, right? So, what I was saying is if you actually just watch your breath, and like the breath has so many manifestations of touch. So, like right now, I'm just breathing through my nose, and there's like a cold part around my nose. I can feel a soft entrance. There's a sort of sensation of touch as it curls around the back, and then as it enters into the lungs, there's like a diffuse. It's just so soft, right? It's an incredibly diffuse and soft feeling, and that's quite different than breathing in through the mouth, which is a slightly different aspect to it. And then both of those sensations of touch are co-opted by smell, taste, also here, right? So, for example, I've got a fire on now, so I can smell the wood burning. I'm drinking coffee, so I've got a taste of coffee. So there's like a the pure input of the touch sense is being co-opted by these other sensations, which are coming through at the same time. And that's just a snippet of what's happening with the breath, right? Earlier, I was doing some weights. I was lifting weights, and my breath had a very different quality to it, right? Very different quality to it as I lifted the weights. So just the sensation of touch, which we normally don't think about the breath as being associated with touch, but is definitely touch, right? And then like I'm doing this with my hands, there's a sensation of touch between the fingers. How microcosmic do you want to get on that sensation of touch, right? And then the sensation of cold. Like this finger is cold, this one's warm. That's weird, right? Um, why are these fingers up in the air, right? So like the sensation of touch, and then the relationships and the relative proportions of the dynamical positioning affects us. So the point is, and then also, if I'm doing like I did this just like if you ping your finger, that's a really hard sense of touch. The other day I was slicing a lemon and whoops, sliced my finger. Yesterday I was putting some wood in the fire, and there was there was like a piece of wire which was really hot, and I burned my finger, and there's like a wire mark. There's like a wire mark right here in my finger where I burned it, right? So these are all like sensations of touch. These are sensations of touch, which have got a very distinct manifestation. And why why is that? Well, the reason for it, there's a bunch of reasons, but one reason to think about is that actually the sensation of touch, while we identify it as ourself, the sensation of touch is an incredibly sophisticated machine. We can think of it as a machine just for fun, but it's an incredibly sophisticated mechanism for information input. And it's much more sophisticated than anything that I could design, right? I mean, I could never design anything as sophisticated as that. That kind of multi, I mean, it's a multi-point system of input. I mean, think about how complicated it is to design a button for a computer, right? Just to design a button so you can do a click on it is actually a pretty complicated thing to do, right? And you might have to think about it for 10 minutes, like where's it going to go if I click this? And that's just one input, which has no tertiary co-opting by other senses. That's just one thing. So if you think about the incredible um, sensitivity, it's astonishing. It's astonishing. And so the error we're making is we think of, well, I've got great taste. Like if you're a wine connoisseur, you've got an amazing sense of taste, right? Or or whoever it might be, right? Or an art historian, got an incredible sense of taste looking at art, right? Um, and then the other thing I was pointing out yesterday is like the sense of touch, for example, is co-opted often by I've already mentioned it can be co-opted by the sense of taste and the sense of smell, right? There's like it's almost like it's a layering of senses, right? There's a layering of senses. But then there's this other kind of layering which can happen is it can get layered with intention, right? So if you think about the way uh, if you get a puppy, right, and the way you touch a puppy, uh, might be it might be very you might interpret that as a very loving touch, right? So is the touch itself loving, or is the way, the dynamic posture, the velocity, the velocity, the uh, the receptivity, is that what's creating the loving touch? Or is there also some sort of layer of there's a sort of layer of imagination which goes over there where we sort of or a layer of emotion where we sort of project emotion into the hand. We're sort of projecting emotion into the hand to sort of create this sort of this caring, a kind touch, right? A kind touch. No, if you're with your lover, you may use a kind touch, but you may not. You may use a different kind of touch, a different style. You may be projecting a different feeling into your hand at that moment, right? Maybe an excited touch, right? Um, Curious touch, right? So there's different sort of conceptual uh, layers which can get projected into, and this might just be the hand, but it can be projected into anything, right? So there's the idea is there's a projection. So this is like what's amazing about this. This all happens without us thinking about it, right? Because clearly we never think about these things. There's this underlying system of incredible sensitivity and sensibility, and it's just unbelievable. And the ego has nothing to do with that. Scott's not creating that, right? I'm sort of riding on the wave, right? It's like somebody delivered a Lamborghini to my front door, and I'm sort of driving it like, how does this work? I don't know, but it's great, right? I don't know how to change the oil, right? I don't know how to like change the timing belt, but there's like a simple system where you just like turn this wheel, right? You a couple of pedals, okay. It's my It's my Lamborghini, right? But it's interesting though, because you wouldn't say I am the Lamborghini, right? You wouldn't say I'm the Lamborghini. You'd say it's a great Lamborghini. But like what happens because we're inside the body, because consciousness is sort of um it's well, we think of it as being inextractable. We think of it as one thing, right? We identify with the Lamborghini, right? We thinking I am the Lamborghini, right? It's my pulse, right? It's my oil tank, right? It's a silly thing to say, really, but the system itself is incredibly complex. So that's just one part of it. So one part of it is this idea of the physical, the ability of consciousness to focus on one part of our body diminishes our perception of other parts. Similarly, and that's just in the sort of physical realm. Similarly, and I mentioned this last week, I think, similarly, in the emotional realm, there are ideas we focus our mind on, which consume our focus. So, for example, if you have a problem with somebody, right? Maybe you're having a fight with your father or something. I don't know, right? And you're really angry, and but you've got other stuff to do, right? You've got to, I can't think about this right now. I got to go on. I got to work today, but your mind keeps going back. Oh, son of a bitch, right? Whatever it might be, right? And so what happens is there's a similar thing that's going on. You can't focus on work because you're so caught up with this emotional moment. Let's just call it a bubble of emotion, right? So you're caught up in this bubble of emotion and you can't focus. So the point is here is that the emotional body, we're going to call it a body, has similar dynamics. So when you focus your consciousness on an emotional issue, much like the hand, your awareness of the other emotional architectures of your being become diminished because you become so focused on this thing. Now, what's interesting about this is like when you focus on the hand and you're not focused on the body's still there, right? What's happening is you're just pushing your awareness onto the hand, but the body is still functioning. The blood's still going, right? Your toenails still need clipped, right? Still have to shave. Everything else is still running. This is just like a set of awareness. Now, with the physical body, this is very easy to see because it's physical. And we can kind of judge the awareness which is going on there. And even then, it's difficult to judge it because most people have difficulty focusing their mind for more than a few minutes, seconds, right? To even become aware of this. And that's something you can see, right? So with the emotional body, or with the collection of emotions and traumas that we've experienced in our life, much like the body, those are still there, even though we're not focused on them, right? So if you had some traumatic event in your childhood, you've forgotten about it in the active part of the mind, but it's still there the same way as the legs are still there, right? The legs are still there, and so is the other part. I'm just gonna hold on a second. I'm gonna keep going on here. I just want to oops. I just want to go and see if there's sometimes people comment and I'm thinking I'm not even looking if there's any comments. So there we go. Great. Nobody's commenting. Cool. Um, anyway, so much like the body, the emotional body is doing the same thing. There's a lack of awareness. So what happens is those traumas, those bubbles of energy are still there. Now, this is obvious. All you have to do is turn your attention to one of them and it's still there, right? Still there. And like sometimes if you focus on it, it can become very big. So this is what I was talking about on the member section the other day. I was talking about how I astral projected into the Overlook Hotel because that's been like haunting me. And so I thought, screw this. And I decided like I'm going to astral project and just confront the fear, go into that bubble and see what's going on. And in some ways, this is what they do in neurolinguistic programming. I guess it's they play around with that sense of focus, right? Play around with the sense of focus and the sense of attention, and they sort of guide your awareness to different areas of consciousness. But it's done kind of in a sort of discreet, manipulative way, right? Um, but the main thing here is to try and just become aware of this stuff. So there's some people who like to manipulate this kind of thing, and there is something attractive about that. Like if you can manipulate attention, I mean, you can see why that would be attractive to people, in some way. But it's so much more satisfying just being aware of it. I mean, just being aware of this stuff is really unbelievable. So that seems like it's kind of interesting. Like we can focus on the hand and then everything else fades out and we can become aware of that, right? And then we can focus on emotions and then watch each one fade out. And the thing is, this is so generally, there's so much unawareness about this that it's almost that itself could just be a meditational practice. And this is actually something I was doing actually is like, when I was being haunted by some of those characters from the past, what I would do is I would say, dude, that's really scary. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on another traumatic event, right? And it's almost like a joke, right? So there are these like what perceivably imaginary or slash astral characters trying to gain your attention. But what you can do is you can turn your mind, because it was funny. Like you might try and like some people like they have like scary haunting experiences, and they'll get cross out and they'll call them God. All well and good, but another way of dealing with it is turn your mind to something which is also very traumatic, and all of a sudden it becomes almost like a comedy, right? It's like, well, what is the biggest, what is the more traumatic thing, right? What is more traumatic? So that's kind of an interesting exercise in like changing the aperture of the lens of awareness into like what is going on, and actually calling out consciousness itself, right? Because when you do something like that, you're actually calling out the mechanics of consciousness. You're saying to consciousness, "Hey, I know what's going on here," and that is a big one up. When you can call out consciousness with your awareness, then you're winning. However, that's not why I'm making the video. And like, so this was the whole point of this video was I talked about this yesterday during the transmission. Um, but I kind of wanted to talk about it more. I just want to, it's the same chat basically, but I just kind of want to like, I rushed it maybe by a few minutes just so I just want to sort of have a bit more time just to get this out because it seemed like an insight to me, when this came to me. Um, so we've looked at the physical body, great. Okay, so there's like a sense of focus. We've looked at the emotional body, great. There's like a sense of focus. Maybe we can play with this, right? Can we play with this? And this is something I do often, like with energy. Sometimes I'll pull energy into one of my hands and then I'll pull it into the other hand. And I'll watch the balance. Like, what's the balance? Bounce energy around this kind of stuff. But what's interesting about this is what's interesting, Scott. The interesting part about this is with the hold on. Um, hold on a second. Let me see if this is actually better here. Yeah, and what I was going to say is this: is here's the crux of my proposition today. Is you often hear people talking, like especially Christians, um, not just Christians, the Buddhists, everybody. But what they always say is, listen, just if you're meditating, just move into your heart space. Move into your heart space, right? I mean, this is one of these funny things because you always wonder, like, it's one of the things people say which we take for granted. Oh, of course, my heart space. I'll move in there. Dude, what does that even mean? What the heck does the heart space even mean? What does it mean? Are we talking about the sense of love and intuition, which is often related to cliche ideas about love, right? You know, it's from the heart, right? Is that I mean that's what we're talking about, right? That's what we're talking about. Is that sense of and you know and that sense does everybody feel that? I mean, it's I think it's almost like it's a convention that we say it comes from the heart. But have you actually felt that? Have you actually felt that it comes from your heart? You may have. You certainly can feel it there. You can feel it from the heart, right? But what I think is it's more or less a convention that people say it's from the heart. Um, I I actually think it's more than the convention, but I think it's more than a convention. But I think people generally understand it from the conventional sense, just because it's something to say. I think people usually say that because it's something to say. Now, I do think there's more to it than that, but uh, but before you get to that point, there's a very important well, I consider a very important transitional understanding before you get to the space of really understanding what the heart space is. Yeah, Vegandos, I'm getting there, but here it is. So, what's this video called? This video is called, what do I call this video? It's called like the location of now. It's something like that, right? It's the location of now, right? The location of now. What does that mean? What is the location of now? And I'm using this in the sense of what I was just talking about with the hand and with the emotions. So I'm focusing on the hand, the rest of the body diminishes. I focus on a specific emotion, the rest of the emotions diminish. So where is the location of now? And as I was saying yesterday, you know, you often hear, well, you don't often hear this, but I've certainly heard I think I heard Adya Shanti actually talking about this, and he was saying that he was like, the thing is, he's like, when you, or maybe it was Eckhart Tolle, but they were saying this, they were saying like, when you move into pure presence, the idea of pure presence, when you move into it, it's so obvious. It's like, how did I not see this? And so it's almost like we don't know the location of what presence is. So we don't know how to look at it because we've never seen it before, right? It's like if you've been traumatized, you didn't know you were traumatized. You didn't know how to look at trauma before you were traumatized. But once you've been traumatized, you know exactly where it is. And it's the same thing with pure presence. You don't know what the location is. But once you've seen it, it's easier to get back to it. So here's the question. Is pure presence in the heart space? Is that where it is? Is that where we got to look? Is into the heart space? Well, what I discovered is that I've had this experience of pure presence, right? And it's astonishing. It's it's you can't really talk about it. It's just astonishing and beautiful. And it's everything people might talk about if they were talking about the Tao, like the real Tao, like what you can't talk about, or if they were talking about Christ or enlightenment. It's all these things, and you can't really say anything about it. It's just this. It just seems to be this infinite emanation of ever flowing energy, and that's about all you can say about it. Right? It's crazy. So the question is that to be discovered in the heart? Is that its dominion? Well, I was meditating on this. I was meditating on this, and what I found is there's a location where you can. There's an entrance point. There is an entrance point to this, and so the entrance point, the most obvious. There's a bunch of entrance points, but the most obvious entrance point is to reflect upon the observer, right? So this is what often happens is like we there's lots of ways of meditating. And me personally, I've been telling people to meditate on the chakras, meditate on the body, there's meditate on the senses. All these things are incredibly useful tools. And and they're just astonishing. And then there's like a different type of meditation, which is propagated by the likes of Ramana Maharshi and Maharshi, no, uh, what's his name? Nisargadatta. I forgot. He's also like a Maharaj or whatever, right? But Nisargadatta, and it's the Advaita meditation style. And what you do, and what Nisargadatta says, is just focus. Um, I'm terrible at math, vegan dolls. Um, and categories. Vegan dolls here is in the commentary, so this is why I'm changing my discourse slightly. She's saying I'm a very category oriented person, and I bet you're good at math. What I'm saying is categories help. The greatest thing about categories is moving in between them, right? So the categories define where not to rest your consciousness or to move between it, right? Um, anyway, what was I talking about there? I was talking about where presence resides, right? Um, so the present actually, I'm gonna switch screens here just so I can focus. I'm like losing my focus here. Um, sorry, vegan bells. The presence. So what I discovered when I was, oh yeah, Nisargadatta, right? So we're on the Nisargadatta thing, and so what Nisargadatta always said, and what his guru told him was just meditate on the observer of your mind. So the idea is like if you're meditating, like okay, I'm meditating on the chakras, or on the hand, and the hand. Yeah, you're thinking about your hand, but who's observing? Because there's always somebody observing this. Like if you look, there's an observer, right? And the observer is just sort of like in back. So you're doing all these things with your consciousness, but at the back, there's like this observer. Now, I've had some big experience with this. So, like last year when I was in Lima in Peru, I'd been listening to Adyashanti's lectures on Nisargadatta, and he had this cool technique of where you actually you move backwards in space, or in it's almost like grammatically. So you say I am or what am I, but then he was suggesting that you almost move back grammatically in the sentence, and then you move before the I. And I remember the time thinking this. It just struck me as sort of a weird way of thinking about it, and so I tried it and had an instant Kundalini explosion. It was unbelievable, right? It was one of the most astonishing experiences. It was like instant, boom, no chance to stop it. I'm going to tell you that I was levitating above the bed. I don't know if I was. It felt like I was, and visions and all kinds of stuff, right? But you can move into that space without having a big Kundalini event. Well, you may have one anyway. So all you have to do is you have to self-reflexively think about move your awareness to the observer. So in the same way that we move our awareness to the hand, like, okay, I'm thinking of my hand or I'm thinking of an emotion, what you do is you move your awareness towards this sensation of observation. Now, the way I think about this is it's almost like if you've got a mirror, if you've got two mirrors and you're sort of lining up the mirrors, and then when you have them perfectly aligned, you've got an infinite mandala, right? An infinite mandala. So your conscious awareness is trying to align with the observer. Now, this can be tricky. My mother's got a telescope, and she was like, "Listen, you got to try the telescope. It's amazing." I was like quite excited. I'm like, "This will be really exciting." And so you got a big fancy telescope, and we're like trying to line up on the moon. But the problem is the magnification is so giant. If you're off like 0.1 of a degree, it's it's like it's really hard to line the thing up. It's like it's hard to get the right angle of reflection. And the same thing is true in consciousness. So when you're trying to observe the observer, it takes practice to do this because the angle of incidence, the angle of incidence between your consciousness and the whoever this observer is quite difficult to know what that is because there's often not instant feedback here, right? There's often not instant feedback of this. Anyway, as I was doing that, I realized that wow, where my awareness is actually located is actually right sort of in the middle of my head, like in the pineal gland area. And then I started connecting with this sense of awareness. Now, here's the news is if you penetrate that sense of the observer, that's where pure presence is, right? So everything Eckhart Tolle talks about and everything that, that's where it is. It's inside the observer. So the observer is actually the membrane of divinity, right? What we would call divinity, because that's the only way of understanding it. It's so beyond anything we can understand as human beings. It's like, forget about it, right? So the membrane of divinity, that's a better name for the video. The membrane of divinity. That sounds cooler, actually, right? I'm going to change the name. So that membrane of divinity. So so it takes a little bit of focus to get your mind focused on this and to get this angle of instance lined up so you get this endless infinite mandala like you might get from two mirrors being lined up. And once the alignment is there, boom. But what that alignment reveals is it doesn't really reveal what you think it's going to. I mean, it's better. It's better than you think it's going to be. And it's very comforting and like, oh, it's overwhelming. Yeah. So I mean, this video is also called The Location of Now, I think is what the original name was before I changed it to the Membrane of Divinity. Um, so where's the location of now? Is it in the pineal gland? He asked hypothetically. No. We all know it's in the heart, right? Well, the answer is yes. What? It's in the pineal gland. And it's in the heart. And it's in the hand. And it's in the foot. And it's in the big toe. And it's in the toenail. And it's in the molecule. And it's in the DNA. What you will discover is when you move your awareness, say, for example, into your hand, you're projecting your consciousness into the hand, right? So now, put your consciousness into the hand and then look for the observer. Look for the observer. The truth is, the observer is everywhere. It's everywhere. Fucking everywhere. And this is what happens with the hold on a second. I got it here on for the video. So I'm gonna have to do this on my telephone. Anyway, so I was totally in this vibe the other night, like I was I was really feeling this. And so the observer's everywhere. And that's why Alex Gray creates images like this. Do you know what that represents? I've talked about this before, right? It's fucking Shiva or God or pure presence. The idea is that the observer, represented here by the eye, there's another one, represented by the eye. I mean, it's almost like a joke. Who am I? It's here. It's in every neuron. It's in every micronic. That doesn't have no word. It's in everywhere we place and it's not encapsulated by the physical world. Like I'm talking about the the molecule, the DNA, the hand, the pineal gland. I mean, we're so anthropomorphic. We're so anthropomorphic with our ways of understanding consciousness, right? Consciousness is just doing us a favor by allowing us to understand it in these anthropomorphic forms. It will take any form. It will do anything. It will go beyond those forms. God forbid you're not ready for that. Yeah. So that was my lesson today, I guess, is like is the location of now is anywhere you place your consciousness. But if you become self-reflexive, if you allow yourself to focus on the point of awareness, that's where it's like there's a big bang happening at the point of awareness every second, right? Life is created at the point of awareness, but we're completely unaware of it. We're not even aware of that, right? And what's interesting is when you become when you become aware of the point of awareness and you start recognizing that whether you're focused on the physical hand or the emotional or the actual point of awareness itself, that what you're actually looking at is an instrument. It's an instrument of divinity, which is beyond the understanding of any human. All of those things. We're just along for the ride. And self-consciousness is so self-reflexive. It's allowed us to have this sensation of independence, and it's allowed us to identify with these senses, which are so staggering. There are so many sensations in this world. Like if you allow your mind, if you allow your awareness to drill down into experience, there's an infinite flow of information from every experience you move into, right? And there's an infinite abundance of beauty, whether it's from the contrast of two musical notes or the contrast of two colors on a canvas or the contrast of two people together or the contrast of two understandings of consciousness. So, for example, oh man, when you allow your mind, and goes back to what Vegan Dolls was saying here about you're very category oriented, Scott, right? So, but the categories allow consciousness. It's like this: consciousness is an infinite field, but categories are like they're like lighthouses in an ocean of information or of consciousness. It's not information; it's everything. And so when you allow your mind to focus on two categories, that creates currents which reveal insight and understanding. So, for example, earlier I was talking about like what is the difference between touching a puppy lovingly or watch the mother of the puppy like licking it and taking care of it and like wow. And if anything was going to happen to that puppy, the mother will jump in and like put its life at stake to save that. It's an incredible conflux of physical, emotional overlays. Interesting. Then, for example, contrast that loving touch with like the touch of like sexuality, right? Those are completely are they are those completely different styles of touch? And does contemplating the difference between the styles of touch, between kindness and, let's say, lust, does that reveal anything? Does the contemplation of touch, of different styles of touch, reveal anything? Is it possible to be lustful and kind at the same time? Or is there like a transition point between there? Like, sometimes, if you're with somebody, you might have a lustful vibe, but then, like after a while, you might feel quite loving, like, wow. And then there's a transition. There's like a transition period where it's like, wow, this is what's going on with this, right? That's an easy one. That's an easy one. But there are more difficult emotions or there are more difficult categories to sort of contemplate. So like lust and kindness, those are actually quite easy. And I mean, it's a very, very satisfying contemplation to see how those ideas are related. It's beautiful. But take a different idea. Take jealousy, for example. And I mean, like, what, that's one category. What would be the, like, a sort of opposite quality of that? I'm not sure. This is like an elemental discussion, I guess, but maybe you could be compassionate, right? Or sort of understanding. And then allowing your mind to go run. What's funny is there are some categories, like, which are there are some categories you'll find your consciousness wants to move around them. There are other categories like jealousy or anything which you personally, you'll find that the flow of energy is much more difficult to manage. The contemplation is more difficult. It's a much more difficult contemplation, personally. Jealousy, oh man, that's a difficult one. And then you don't even want to find what the nice one is. You don't even want to go there. But they're important contemplations. And what's more important than this, it's not even important like from the human side of things. It's not even important from the human side of things. I mean, listen, contemplating the transition between lust and kindness, or between jealousy and compassion, those are very valuable contemplations from a human perspective. But but much like, but what happens is, if you're lucky, when you're contemplating these concepts, what happens is the structure of consciousness appears. This is the value of doing this. The value is that when you become self-reflexive, because even in that moment, listen, here's the crazy thing, is even in that moment of contemplation between lust and kindness, that's still a focus of consciousness. It's the same thing as focusing on the hand. So as you're focusing on this, incredible relationship, right? So if you're focusing on the hand, you're focusing on a physical static object, more or less. But when you're focusing on the relationship of two categories, you're actually you're focusing, like, it's almost like focusing on a verb, that you're focusing on a dynamic relationship. Hand static, categories static, relationships between them highly dynamic, but there's still an observer. And so during this contemplation on the dynamic relationships between categories, if you start allowing yourself to see that you're the observer, that the observer is there, the structure of consciousness starts to appear. And there's this crazy structure. And like, the Buddhas, the bodhisattvas of consciousness abide in the awareness of pure consciousness. So you can discover the reality of these bodhisattvas who almost are surfing, they're surfing the effusive waves radiating from pure awareness. From that tiny molecule from which emerges the whole of reality. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are radiating for those who dare to contemplate it. They're there. You can see them. And it's just amazing. But clearly there's a process before you can get to the point of observing these things. Because first of all, you wouldn't even admit that that might be possible, right? And then to actually go through like, man, this is a pain in the ass focusing in my hand all the time. I wouldn't do it. I would not focus on my hand. It's too boring, right? And it is boring unless you've got some kind of like awareness of the energy. If you can't sense prana or chi, it doesn't make any sense to focus on the hand. It seems stupid and boring. Now, there's a lot of exercises. I don't know how this happens. I mean, some people are just lucky and they get gifted with this stuff, but you know, there seems to be like a gulf because I speak to a few people and they're like, well, they can. How do we become aware of this? I mean, some ways of becoming aware of this is like by doing drugs, doing acid or DMT or ayahuasca. That can open your awareness to this a bit, I think. Massive. Obviously opens your awareness to this massively. Because before I did ayahuasca, I would have laughed at anybody who I'd heard saying this kind of stuff. I can't believe I'm here for 50 minutes talking about this. And I did an hour yesterday talking about the same thing. And it's still not boring to me. I don't feel like I should be stopping talking about this. Right? It's so important to to just to relate that this is possible. Um, but to me, that seems like that. To me, for me, that's kind of what the final output is. So over the years, I've been talking a lot about like focusing on energy and focusing on like sensual energy. But the real output of this is awareness of everything. It's awareness. It's all awesome, all of it. But I mean, when you break through into the structure of consciousness and you actually see the bodhisattvas or Buddhas, whoever the hell they are, and the awareness, and all of this has come. I mean, I guess the only way to think. I mean, people call it presence, but I think that whole thing about the Tao, just like that whole idea that the real Tao is the Tao you can't talk about. That's what it is. Is this? It's just unbelievable, man. This emanation. And the thing is, my tendency is to talk about a single is my tendency is to say it's a single point from which everything emanates, like it's a big bang at every moment. But it's like everywhere, anywhere you focus. And so it's funny. So like if I'm vegan dolls, don't even go there. Um the the focus on these points is it's, I mean, how does that even happen? It's everywhere. It's not a central point. It manifests everywhere. Every the unlimited nectar of consciousness. That's what it is. Now, there seems to be a tendency in some traditions to like what happens is it's clear, like if you can break into the structure of consciousness and you can see the bodhisattvas and stuff, I mean, that's really amazing. And there's a process, I would call it like uh depersonalization, which seems to be part of the process of enlightenment a bit, where you go through these deaths where you don't feel like you're yourself anymore, like you don't exist. Like who is Scott actually? And I've been having that quite a bit, where you have these moments and you just like you realize that Scott doesn't exist. It's just this it's just this sort of little spiral of thought forms which have built around certain categories. Um, and so I think what happens is there's a tendency in some traditions for people like you can see things like the structure of consciousness in the bodhisattvas or God or whatever deities, uh, and there's a you it's so awesome. There's a book. There's certain books where they were talking about. There's a book by Daniel Odier on Kali, and he points out that in some traditions, they start thinking about the body as like a bag of excrement because because they're so enamored with these higher visions, supposedly higher visions of consciousness, right? But this is really a big mistake, and it's one of the things in Tantra is Tantra sees every single layer as a manifestation of divinity, right? And so this is the thing is like seeing the bodhisattvas is like amazing, but like, dude, allowing your consciousness to move between categories is amazing. Allowing your consciousness to move between different layers in your skin is amazing. This is the thing, like if you can move your mind, like let's just think about one finger. Can you move your consciousness under the skin? Imagine it's like a little ring of energy and it just moves under the skin, over the muscles, over the bones, and down here. It's an imaginative exercise. It's completely possible to do that. And just think about that. And that just seems like a stupid imagination. It's real. It's imaginative, but it's a real feeling, right? I mean, you can actually, and if you do it a few times, you might actually start feeling like, wow, it really is moving a little bit. But that in itself is amazing. So what I'm saying is categories. If it's like moving between the flesh and the bone, two categories, that's astonishing. If it's moving between the hand and the arm, that's astonishing. If it's moving between the toe and the foot, that's astonishing. If it's moving between trauma and love, that's astonishing. If it's moving between projection and self reflection, that's astonishing. If it's moving between physical reality and transdimensionality and the bodhisattvas and pure awareness, that's also astonishing. But all of them are equally astonishing. Man, I'm really lit up right now. Man, wow. Whew. I think I'm kind of done. I mean, I think I'm kind of like dragging this out a bit longer here. I'm going on a bit too long. But yeah. Anyway, think I'm done. And oh yeah, Vegan Dolls was asking me what's going on with my girlfriend. So I'm just going to tell you it's undefined. Don't know what's going on. What happened is we both got COVID. She got it first and became really, really ill. Um, then I got it and I also got ill too. I took ivermectin and she didn't. She went through a very, very she's still going she's recovered, but she's going to hyperbaric chamber every day still trying to clear out her lungs. Um, and then everything went into lockdown here, and we were locked down for 2 or 3 months. She lives 2 hours away from me. I couldn't see her. And I think, basically it created like a rift somehow. So that sort of sucked. We still talk and stuff every day. But the problem is that she's she almost died basically. She almost died and she's been going through a whole bunch of stuff, blah 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 blah, and so we're kind of like in a sort of undefined state. We came out of lockdown a couple of weeks ago, and so we're talking about maybe I'll go up and see her again, but undefined. So not really sure. It's got a slight tinge of weird vibe to it, maybe. So I mean, whatever. These things happen, but it's not yeah, undefined. I'm just gonna say it's undefined, and we'll see what happens. Yeah. So who knows? Anyway, there you go. That's the gossip vegan dolls. Yeah. Anyway, I think I'm done chatting for today. Hope you enjoyed the. I actually can't take the live stream outside because I'm on there's an element of that, Mikkel, too, but it's hard to judge. The problem with her, she's like literally a genius, and like she's also like more switched on spiritual than I am. So it's like you can't really, yeah, yeah, it's a tough one. Fascinating. It's been a really great ride, though. It's been really cool, really interesting. But anyway, uh, no, celibacy fast. Well, there, yeah. I'd say I've been on that fast there, vegan dolls. I've been on the celibacy fast, so it's all good. Um, but yeah, there you go. Anyway, that's it for now. Um, yeah, guys, I'm done. Take care. It's just nice chatting, though, right? But I gotta get the hell out of here. Peace out, man.